They say the human brain does something strange when it senses danger too late. It rewinds. It replays moments that once felt ordinary and coats them in dread. A phone call that seemed harmless. A smile that lingered a second too long. A decision that felt lucky until it wasn't. Because 31 days before she was found dead in her bed, she believed she had just uncovered the greatest secret of her life. A fortune her father had hidden. A legacy no one knew existed. And a truth that, once discovered, could not be undiscovered. By the time authorities entered her bedroom, the house was silent. No forced entry, no overturned furniture, no sign of struggle. Just a woman lying perfectly still beneath white sheets, as if someone had carefully arranged the scene to look peaceful. But peace was the one thing she had not known in the final weeks of her life. Her name was Eleanor Whitmore, and this is the story of what happened in the 31 days between discovery and death. If you're new here, take a moment to subscribe now, because the deeper this story goes, the darker it becomes, and you won't want to miss what comes next. Eleanor grew up believing her father was a simple man. Arthur Whitmore worked as a civil engineer for the state. No flashy job, no expensive habits, no signs of wealth. He lived in the same modest two-story home for over 40 years, drove the same aging sedan, and clipped coupons well into his retirement. To neighbors, he was forgettable. To colleagues, reliable but unremarkable. To Eleanor, he was kind but distant. He never talked about his past, never discussed finances, never spoke about family beyond her mother, who passed away when Eleanor was 12. And when Arthur died suddenly from a heart attack at 71, there was no reason to believe he'd left behind anything more than memories, or so Eleanor thought. At the time of his death, Eleanor was 36 years old, recently divorced, working a mid-level job in archival management at a regional library, smart, methodical, and deeply private. She had moved back into her childhood home temporarily to settle her father's affairs, assuming it would be a short, emotionally exhausting process. It was supposed to take weeks. Instead, it took her life. The discovery happened on a Tuesday afternoon. Eleanor was sorting through the attic, dusty boxes, old tax returns, broken lamps, when she found something that didn't belong. A fireproof lockbox. It was tucked behind a false wall panel, concealed so well it could only have been placed deliberately. No label, no markings, just weight, heavier than it should have been. Inside were documents that made no sense at first glance. Offshore bank statements, trust agreements, property deeds in counties she'd never heard of, account balances that didn't feel real, 7 figures, then 8, then more. At first, Eleanor assumed it had to be a mistake, forgery, some kind of elaborate misunderstanding. Her father had never lived like a wealthy man. So why did these papers suggest he had quietly accumulated a fortune worth over $12 million? But one detail erased all doubt. A notarized letter, written in Arthur Whitmore's unmistakable handwriting. "If you are reading this," it began, "then I am gone, and the time for silence has ended." The letter explained everything, and nothing. Arthur claimed the money was legally obtained, earned through investments and opportunities he could never speak of while alive. He warned Eleanor not to discuss the discovery with anyone until she had fully understood its scope. And then came the sentence that would haunt investigators later. "There are people who believed this would die with me. They were wrong." In the days that followed, Eleanor did exactly what her father had always done. She said nothing. No friends, no co-workers. not even her ex-husband. But silence didn't mean inactivity. Eleanor began researching. She accessed public land records tied to the properties mentioned in the documents. Most were vacant parcels scattered across Texas, Arizona, and New Mexico. Several had been sold years earlier, for cash. She contacted one of the offshore banks listed, expecting resistance. Instead, the representative confirmed everything. The accounts were real, active, and now legally hers. It was only then that Eleanor did something uncharacteristic. She told someone. Her closest friend, Marissa Kane, later told police Eleanor had called her late at night, voice trembling, not with excitement, but fear. She kept saying it felt wrong, Marissa recalled, like she'd stepped into someone else's life. Eleanor told her about the letter, about the warning, about the money. Marissa advised her to hire a lawyer immediately. Eleanor agreed. But before she could, the phone calls began. The first call came from an unknown number. No voice, just breathing. She hung up, unsettled but unconvinced it meant anything. The second call was different. A man spoke this time, calm, measured. "You found something that doesn't belong to you," he said. Eleanor demanded to know who he was. The line went dead. Over the next 2 weeks, Eleanor's behavior changed. She stopped going to work, cancelled plans, began sleeping with the lights on. Security footage from a neighbor's camera would later show a dark sedan idling across the street from her house on multiple nights, always gone by morning. She contacted a lawyer, but never followed through with a formal consultation. Instead, she began documenting everything herself. Emails, voicemails, screenshots. She was building a timeline. And then she made the mistake investigators believe sealed her fate. She scheduled a meeting. On day 28 after the discovery, Eleanor met with a private financial consultant recommended by the bank. The meeting lasted less than an hour. Witnesses described Eleanor leaving pale, shaken, clutching her bag as if it contained something fragile. That night she sent one final message to Marissa. "If anything happens to me," it read, "it wasn't an accident." 3 days later, Eleanor Whitmore was found dead in her bed. No signs of trauma, no defensive wounds, no toxins immediately detected. The medical examiner initially ruled it natural causes, until the autopsy came back inconclusive, and investigators started asking a question that still echoes unanswered. What kind of fortune kills the person who inherits it? The last 72 hours of Eleanor Whitmore's life were quiet in a way that feels unnatural when examined too closely. No frantic calls, no dramatic confrontations, no last-minute escape attempts. Just a woman moving carefully through her days, as if she already knew the ground beneath her was giving way. On the morning after her meeting with the financial consultant, Eleanor returned home and did something she had not done since moving back into the house. She locked every door, not just the front and back, but the interior ones too. Bedroom, office, basement. Later, police would find that she had wedged a chair beneath the bedroom door handle, an improvised barrier that suggested fear, but also preparation. She spent most of that day inside her father's old study. Neighbors reported seeing the lights on well into the early hours of the next morning. When investigators accessed her laptop, they discovered Eleanor had been searching for very specific things. Her father's name, paired with court records. Property transactions from the early 1990s. Corporate shells dissolved without explanation. And then a phrase that appeared repeatedly in her search history. Asset laundering through land trusts. The deeper Eleanor dug, the more the fortune stopped looking like a miracle and started resembling a grave marker. The financial consultant she met with, whose name police would later redact from public documents, had confirmed what Eleanor already feared. The money was clean now, but it hadn't started that way. According to records buried behind layers of legal insulation, Arthur Whitmore had been involved in a network of land acquisitions that coincided with a string of unexplained disappearances along a remote Texas highway corridor in the late 1980s. Small-time contractors, independent surveyors, 2 rival developers, all vanished, all cases unsolved, all properties eventually consolidated under shell companies tied back, indirectly, to Arthur. The implication was never spoken aloud, but Eleanor understood it. Her father hadn't just invested well, he had benefited from absence. By the second night, Eleanor began transferring files onto an external drive. She labeled it simply, "If I'm gone." At 2:17 a.m., she sent an encrypted email to herself containing login credentials to the offshore accounts. At 3:04 a.m., she typed out a draft message addressed to authorities, detailing everything she'd learned. She never sent it. At some point during those early hours, Eleanor realized a terrible truth. The fortune wasn't the danger. Knowing where it came from was. The final day began uneventfully. Eleanor was seen retrieving mail. She waved to a neighbor. She accepted a package delivered mid-afternoon. The package contained no return address. Inside was a single object, a key, old brass, and unmistakably not hers. Attached was a small tag with 4 handwritten numbers. 1989. The same year the first disappearance occurred. Police would later determine the key belonged to a storage facility 30 miles outside town, a unit rented under a company name that no longer existed. Eleanor never went there. Instead, she placed the key on her bedside table. That night, she made her last phone call. Marissa described Eleanor as calm, too calm. She said she was tired, Marissa told investigators. But it didn't sound like sleep. It sounded like surrender. Eleanor asked her one final question. "If someone leaves you something bad," she said, "do you have the right to give it back?" At 11:42 p.m., Eleanor's phone activity stopped. Sometime after midnight, she died. There were no signs of forced entry, no fingerprints other than her own, no toxins detected in initial screenings. But something about the scene unsettled the first responder. Eleanor was lying on her back, hands folded neatly over her abdomen. The bedroom window was open, even though it was unusually cold for the season. And the chair wedged beneath the door had been moved, not knocked over, not broken, just repositioned, as if someone had been careful. The autopsy raised more questions than answers. No obvious cause of death, no trauma, no underlying condition severe enough to explain it. The official ruling was undetermined. The case should have ended there, but it didn't, because when police began inventorying Eleanor's belongings, they discovered something missing: the external drive, the one labeled "If I'm gone." It was never found. Neither was the draft message she had written. Her laptop showed signs of remote access in the hours following her death. Whoever accessed it knew exactly what to delete and exactly what to leave behind. Investigators attempted to trace the offshore accounts. They were empty, not drained chaotically, closed cleanly, legally, as if the fortune had simply evaporated. When authorities attempted to question individuals connected to the old land deals, they encountered a wall of silence. Records missing, witnesses deceased, statutes expired. The past had been scrubbed smooth. Within 6 months, Eleanor Whitmore's case was quietly closed. No suspects, No charges, no public explanation. Marissa received Eleanor's belongings shortly after. Among them was the brass key. She turned it over to police. They never followed up. Years later, a journalist investigating unsolved deaths requested access to Eleanor's file. What they received was thin, too thin. Entire sections were redacted without explanation. But tucked into the back was a single note, written by a junior detective and never meant for public release. It appears Whitmore inherited more than money. She inherited liability. To this day, the storage unit tied to the key remains sealed. The land parcels tied to Arthur Whitmore are now owned by anonymous entities, and Eleanor's fortune has never resurfaced. Some believe she was murdered. Others believe she was warned, given time to put things in order before something inevitable happened. And a few believe something far darker, that Eleanor discovered the fortune wasn't meant to be inherited at all. It was meant to be contained, because some legacies don't want heirs, they want silence. If this story stayed with you, make sure you're subscribed. Stories like this don't end when the screen goes dark, and neither do the secrets buried beneath them. And somewhere, locked behind a rusted door, there may still be answers waiting for someone brave enough to turn the key. But remember this: every fortune has a cost, and sometimes it collects.